federal mandate to raise the drinking age to 21, looking at why 21 and enforcement. What is the Act mandate about? When passed, why? What does it require? This mandate is about raising the drinking age to 21 because some people believe that a large amount of teen-involved accidents are caused by underage drinking. It was passed in 1984 to have states raise age or lose highway funding. It was passed to reduce teen crashes involving alcohol. This requires you to be 21 before drinking. Traditionally, whose area of responsibility does this mandate fall under? It is traditionally the state's responsibility to decide the drinking age and other related restrictions, but they were leveraged by the national government into changing the age, otherwise they could possibly lose national highway funding. Is it tied to any pre-existing grants? There are currently no ties to any pre-existing grants. How is it going to be administered and enforced? Some ways of enforcing drinking age laws are by such common things like checking IDs and looking for people who look young, and more complex things like increased enforcement, monitoring around places that sell or distribute alcohol, having better trained alcohol monitors, have specialty police officers tasked with enforcing the legal age of drinking alcohol, and random testing at certain events and parties. What are penalties if states refuse to do so? Penalties will be handled at a national level for each state depending on the situation, but in most common cases the national government has said that they will eliminate federal grants given for state highways. What are the two main arguments from the national government? Raising the drinking age has caused less accidents. Young adults are vulnerable to brain damage from drinking because they haven't fully developed. We would promote the use of fake IDs to get alcohol, which would create more security concerns and less respect for the law. Raising the drinking age might actually move the drunk driving age from one bracket to another. Now to the debate, state versus national.
The question that we would like to ask the national government is, if you're old enough to go to war, shouldn't you be able to have a beer? The government's mandate to raise the drinking age to 21 or lose federal highway funds was inappropriate action to solve the problem of drinking-related accidents. This is because it would simply infringe on people's 21st Amendment rights. It gives them the right to drink and own alcohol, and it denies that right to teenagers that are ages 18 to 20, and it's pretty much age discrimination. And it would promote the use of fake IDs. This would cause less respect for the law and more security concerns, and they aren't legal. And it still doesn't change the fact that people would still drink. They'd be looking for the thrill of breaking the law, so they'd just go and drink and say they broke the law.
Now to our state.
Our thesis is that the federal government acted appropriately in this mandate to the states that they would raise their drinking age to 21 years or lose federal highway funds. The Federal Uniform Drinking Age Act, signed by President Ronald Reagan on July 17, 1984, threatened to withhold highway construction funds from the states that failed to increase their minimum legal drinking age to 21 by October 1, 1986. The first point that I will make is that the highway deaths decreased by up to 36% with a minimum drinking age of 21. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention estimated that fatal and non-fatal injuries combined increased 10% when the drinking age was lowered, but they decreased by 16% when the drinking age was raised to 21. The second point that I will make is that the public continues to support the current drinking age of 21. According to the 2007 Gallup poll, 77% of the U.S. adults age 18 and older would oppose the federal law to lower the drinking age to 18. In addition, 60% favored stricter penalties for underage drinking. It appears that the data, also, as well as the American public, support the continuous minimum drinking age of 21 as mandated by the federal government and the Federal Uniform Drinking Age Act. My question is, do you think lowering the drinking age will decrease the number of highway fatalities?
Drink more than if they were underage?
Perhaps you can argue over how raising the drinking age would be beneficial towards today's society, but the way National enforced the act was completely unacceptable. To be clear, my argument is not against the argument of drinking age, but over how National enforced it. So what National did was they required all states to enforce a minimum legal drinking age of 21 or else risk losing 10% of all federal highway funds. Federal highway funds are crucial to states, and even 10% of funding lost would cost most states millions of dollars. This big of a change to state budget would cripple it. So naturally, the states agreed to enforce the drinking age. The Highway Trust Fund still functions because it lives off of federal funding, and National holds a death grip over funding for the fund, and uses that threat as leverage for the states to always comply. According to Brian Resnick and Emma Roller, National has used this mandate threat 4 times as an almost guaranteed way to get what it wants. And I believe that threatening such an important fund to enforce laws is not the appropriate action towards stopping drinking-related accidents. National is allowed to do this under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the spending clause of the Constitution, allowing the federal government to withhold highway funds, thereby exerting its control over the states. While National does need some way for states to enforce some acts like speed limits and helmet use, using a surefire method to make states forced to do as it's told gives too much power in influencing state law. I also believe that for each individual state to decide, while National does need some way for states to enforce some acts like speed limits and helmet use, using a surefire method to make states forced to do as it's told gives too much power in influencing state law. I also believe that for each individual state to decide over whether they want to use alcohol or not, and that National's mandate was not an appropriate action to solve the problem of drinking-related accidents. Finally, my question is, if the national drinking age was raised to a national minimum of 21 years of age, wouldn't that just increase temptation for teenagers to drink earlier in their lives or try alcohol as soon as they turn 21?
Appropriately, when it made the mandate making the states raise their drinking age to 21 or lose federal highway funds, because the consumption of alcohol can interfere with the development of young adults' brains. It can damage the frontal lobes, which are essential for the functions like emotional regulation, organization, and planning. When the young adult's brain starts to become even more damaged, it can lead to greater vulnerability to addiction, memory loss, violence, dangerous risk-taking behavior, depression, reduced decision-making ability, and suicide. A recent study conducted at the University of California, San Diego, compared brain scans of young adults that drank heavily with those who do not, and the results were quite telling. The study found that the young adults that drank heavily had damaged nerve tissue in their brains. The researchers believed that this damage can be linked to a decrease in attention span in young men and a decrease in the ability to comprehend visual information in young women.